Tonight is Maundy Thursday in Holy Week, and Maundy is a Latin word that means commandment. And tonight is the Christian observance of Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples. Jesus and his disciples gathered on this night, which was also the Passover. They gathered to observe the Jewish Passover, which is a meal to remember the Exodus story, God's powerful liberation of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. God heard the cries of God's suffering children and showed mercy and love and faithfulness to them, sending Moses, the prophet liberator, to confront Pharaoh, the powerful leader of Egypt, with the power of God, saying, "Let my people go." And Jews and Christians remember the Passover, the night of Passover, tonight, a night in which God freed God's people from suffering. As I said before, it is also for Christians, the institution of the Lord's Supper. Jesus and his disciples and subsequent followers, the church, in some ways sort of appropriated and changed the Passover meal to also be a remembrance of Jesus, who demonstrated God's power of liberation by forgiving sins, and by touching and healing sick bodies, feeding hungry bodies, confronting unjust treatment of the poor and those and other people on the social and economic and religious margins. Jesus enacted God's power in humble service. John's gospel, unlike the other three gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in their telling of the Last Supper and Jesus's final Passover meal with his disciples the night before what Christians call Good Friday, the night before he is arrested and put on trial and executed on a cross. On Maundy Thursday, John tells us when they gathered for the meal, John's gospel includes this remarkable scene of Jesus fashioning a towel around his waist and getting a basin of water and kneeling at the feet of his disciples, the 12, and beginning to wash their feet. Jesus begins to act like a slave or a humble servant to his disciples. They're confused by this and don't understand what he's doing. And Peter, one of his disciples, says to Jesus, you'll never wash my feet. But Jesus says, unless I wash your feet, you will have no part of me. There's something about this humble act that Jesus insists they allow him to do. They surrender their feet to him. In the ancient world, feet were often very dirty. And when you came into a household, into a home, often there would be a place to wash your feet off because of footwear, and as it was, and if you had footwear at all, and then also just the dirty and muddy roads on which people traveled. So after a long day of travel, you might come into a house for a meal and you would be given an opportunity to wash your feet. And sometimes someone would serve you in that way and wash your feet. Well, here's Jesus, the teacher and Lord, their rabbi, who's now kneeling before them and acting as a servant. An act of love that he says is meant to inspire acts of love. He says, just as I have loved you, I now command you to love one another. That the heart of Jesus's message and mission and ministry is to serve others, and especially those who were in need of mercy, those who were in some way suffering, to provide some relief, some comfort. And so on this night, we remember that Jesus and his disciples gathered in this way for a simple meal, the Passover meal, a small gathering in their homes. And this year may be the first time for some of us as Christians when we are really forced during this time of social distancing, practicing social distancing, and in response to the COVID-19 virus, that we're really not able to gather as a Christian community the ways we have in the past to observe and remember this night. And so we're gathering in our homes. And we've provided for you a simple liturgy to remember this night, to remember the Passover, to remember Jesus, and to remember his sacrifice, the sacrifice of his life, both in the ways in which he humbly served others with his body, and the way in which he gave his body, gave his life as a sacrifice for all. And so we remember this night these God's deeds of power and love. And we are also reminded on this night that we are like Jesus's disciples 2,000 years ago. We are now the ones who are called to love one another through nights of suffering and hardship, denial and betrayal. Sometimes our bodies betray us, and they don't do what we need them or want them to do. Sometimes we are in denial of our own hard circumstances, or in denial of unjust circumstances and the hard circumstances of life for others. We also are reminded on this night that we are called to love the unlovely and hard to love parts of ourselves. And during this time when we're all sort of, socially distanced and we're living with our families in quarantine, something about me that is hard to love is surely going to be made known. Something about each of us that is unlovely is likely going to come out during this time. And so we're going to need to figure out how to love one another, and serve one another, because we can't be together with others. How do we touch and love and serve those in our direct households? So tonight we're gathering around our tables, and we're eating this meal together in remembrance of Jesus, in remembrance of the Passover, God's liberating act of love for God's children. It's a message we all need right now. This remembrance that God has acted with power in the past to rescue God's people from suffering and death. And we need that message now maybe more than some of us have needed in our lifetimes, to remember and trust that God is a God who acts with mercy and love for God's children. And maybe the food that we share tonight can be for us a sign of God's love. After all, God, the Creator, and the creation itself becomes our food that sustains us and nourishes us, food that brings comfort to us, food that makes our bodies feel good, food that heals and brings health. We know that food is itself a kind of medicine. And so tonight, when you gather around your meal, I encourage you not to waste any of what is set before you to eat. Eat it all, share it, enjoy it, and do it in remembrance of the God who made us and loves us. I thought I would end this video for you tonight by teaching you a couple of Hebrew table blessings that will likely be prayed around Jewish tables and were probably prayers prayed by Jesus and his disciples. The first one is this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And then this prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari ha'adamah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the earth. May this night be a night of remembrance. May it be a night of love for you, a night in which you are served and can serve one another, and a night in which the food that is before us gives you strength, nourishment, and hope.